I loved love. I loved romance. I loved imagining the tension, the angst, the electricity pulsing between two people that were destined to be together. When I got a little older, I pushed it away for seemingly more grown-up media, but the romance in certain stories always called me back. It wasn't until my late 20s that I realized that there was no reason not to embrace my love of love fully and without shame. I had gone on my own heroine's journey in a way. I had put aside the feminine, learned the rules of the boys' club in order to get by in a man's world, only to feel a yearning to reconnect with the things associated with femininity. But you don't just go back to the innocence of it. Your tastes obviously change as you age, and your experiences greatly affect the sort of media that you want to consume.
Excuse me, have you seen The Feminine Mystique? I've lost my copy.
Now, I find myself wanting to consume media that exaggerates these themes, that plays with them on a level that is knowingly and unabashedly fun. I wanted love stories on the level of The Fast and the Furious, but instead of cars and stunts and unbelievable but fun action-y tropes, they'd be soaked in over-the-top romantic tropes like accidental kisses, reverse harem, one bed, one blanket, and forbidden love. I wanted the angst and the conflict to be so over the top that I would simultaneously laugh and cry, truly feeling both emotions at once. I've talked about the Heroines Journey before on this channel, but I always keep coming back to it. Maureen Murdoch justified my desires and gave me the tools to discover myself again and again. Recently, I wanted to do a video on my favorite romantic arc, enemies to lovers, but I quickly realized it wasn't just enemies to lovers that needed to be discussed. The enemies to lovers trope typically comes along with two other tropes I also love, the villainous crush and love redeems. All three together rarely happen in Western media, but they will get so close to it happening that individuals who see themselves in those characters will go write them where all these things actually do occur. You know, fanfic? It's great. These tropes also occur in a lot of romance novels and in young adult or new adult books. Also in a lot of webtoons. Stuff that's made by women for women. Unsurprisingly, these tropes are considered problematic because they don't show so-called healthy romantic relationships. But I think people misinterpret what these tropes actually mean. Everything in story has a potential metaphor, intentional or not. And what I like to do is get at the heart of what a theme or trope actually means to the person writing it or to the person consuming it. Now, before we really get into it, let's define some of these terms. Enemies to lovers is a trope where two people on different sides of a struggle or conflict fall in love. This has many possibilities and can range from being passive, simply on opposite sides of a conflict or battle, to an actively trying to kill each other. It does differ from rivals to lovers, but not metaphorically.
It's you. Just please remove him from my sight.
What have you done to her?
Me? It's her.
Ha!
Rivals to lovers is where you have two people who just generally don't like one another.
I loathe you.
I loathe you.
But say you have a story about a young girl who transfers to a new school and catches the eye of a bully. The stakes are high for a modern drama. They make a stance against one another. He fights her, she fights back. In this setting, this could be considered enemies to lovers. It all sort of comes down to the level of antagonism between the characters. When this is done intentionally, when the two are definitely, by the writer's own plan, going to end up together, it almost doesn't matter the level of antagonism, because there's usually a sense of intrigue, typically on the part of the male character. He wants her, but he doesn't know how to have her. And because he is emotionally immature, he acts in a way that pushes her away. From a romance novel perspective,
we know that the hero loves the woman all along, we the readers, even if the heroine is confused. And that's absolutely crucial. So that any kind of aggression that he exhibits towards her, or meanness, any kind of pain that he inflicts, is always in the service of love.
This push and pull that happens between these characters is actually the best part of the tropes, to me. You get a ton of stuff to play with from a storytelling perspective, especially when you look at the push and pull as something that occurs within oneself. More on that in a bit. Villainous crush is a trope where the romantic interest is a villain, an antagonist, or just a bad boy. The intrigue for this trope goes hand in hand with the previous. A lot of people like to say women are intrigued by the bad boy because of the desire to nurture and change him. And this is maybe 30% of the explanation, depending on who you ask. The bad boy typically will have traits that are at odds with the heroine. She's a good girl who does as she is told, whereas he is a professional troublemaker. He seduces her, sometimes unintentionally.
Perhaps you just want to learn the monster's weaknesses.
You're not a monster.
Sometimes she doesn't realize she's being seduced. Again, this is a metaphor, which I will get to. The third trope is love redeems, another so-called problematic trope. This is the one where love saves the villain or the bad boy. A lot of people say that love shouldn't redeem, and that heroines shouldn't be tasked with having to save the bad boy. And yeah, femininity is not a magical power, even though it is sometimes perceived in that way. But the journey to love does require you to self-explore in a way that can lead to an immense change. I think Love Redeems works best when you see a metaphor and a greater journey happening underneath the surface. And this is one way to look at it. Now, when I set out to map this journey, I decided to use the Heroines Journey by Maureen Murdoch as a sort of guide. I always thought that love stories are heroic tales, and this was a good opportunity to show that. To review, Maureen Murdoch set out to write a journey that would provide more of a feminine context to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. I look at it as an extension of the hero's journey because I see it as essential to breaking away from the masculine warrior myth that we all have thrust upon us in the West. She says of the differences that the feminine journey is about going down deep into the soul, healing and reclaiming, while the masculine journey is up and out to spirit. I'm going to be taking a lot of liberties with Murdoch's work, so I recommend checking out my video on a feminine power fantasy or reading the Heroine's Journey itself to really understand it. To best illustrate this arc, which I have named Villainous Lover Redeemed, I'm going to mostly use Meteor Garden 2018, which is a story that's been done over and over and over again for years. It's a classic, and there's a reason it's a classic. Also to note, it is written by a woman, which is very important for some of the points I will make. And of course, light spoilers for the show, obviously, but come on, Asian dramas aren't really big about keeping a lid on spoilers. These two are so obviously going to tie the knot at the end. Let's see how they get there. The first step in this arc is a separation from innocence or safety. This could be losing a mother, it could be leaving a home, it could also be simply growing up. In Murdoch's journey, this happens usually when the woman is young and she must put aside so-called childish things in order to be successful in a man's world. But it could also occur when villains or a bad boy enters the heroine's world. This is what most often occurs in these romance stories. The heroine is challenged by this character. She's made to feel unsafe in her daily life. Her world is thrown out of balance because of this new presence. Not only is he a physical threat, but he tries to seduce her to his world, a world that is seemingly dangerous. Most heroines are taken out of their states of innocence by a hero, like Snow White or Rapunzel. But I think being taken out of innocence by a villain is far more interesting. While the hero provides a masculine, heroic, and experienced partner, the villain provides a dark desire, a yearning for more power the woman does not believe she has or is worthy of. This character is metaphorically the woman's inner man, or the masculine sides of themselves, or the animus. I believe that the animus as a villain is far more accurate to represent the specific pressures and expectations that are put on women. The villain helps her explore those deeper parts of her desires that she was told are evil, such as power, independence, rebelliousness, or sexual pleasure. After accepting the villain's challenge, the heroine decides to step into his world, and maybe not in the way he expected. This is her moment of crossing the threshold into the unknown. She begins to learn the rules of his world, the rules of the boys' club. Throughout this time, she is faced with many other tests and trials, people who tell her she's not strong enough, that she's getting in over her head. She meets new friends who put her in new situations. This is also a gathering of allies in a sense. Maybe there's an attractive boy who has a much better reputation and would seemingly make a better match, who is there at every obstacle. But she's been challenged by this guy, and she's got to prove herself worthy in his world regardless of how she feels about him. A note on abusive themes.
I'm attracted to power dynamics, probably because I have felt weak in a lot of situations.
Abuse portrayed in these stories is a problem. I think the more epic these stories are, the more likely you are to see physical or violent conflict occur. For me, it's important to realize the purpose of the physical conflict. It's more palatable when the two are evenly matched. Playing with power imbalances in story can be empowering because in real life we feel those power imbalances very strongly.
我想要的东西绝对会夺到手。
你为什么要这么做？
因为我想要你。
So basically, societal imbalances we experience in real life can simply translate into physical imbalances in the story. I've personally written some pretty violent conflict between my characters in my fiction, and it always seemed like it was for the purpose of discovering my own inner power. From the perspective of a woman writing these themes, they're not only affected by the media that they have consumed that usually consists of these power imbalances, but they are also usually trying to deal with their own external and internal struggles that may come out in the way they write their romances.
People always ask me, like, which character you identify with, and I really identify with both of my characters equally. For me, Livy is the side of me that is more vulnerable, softer, more curious, and Caleb, I feel, is my more like, I'm on top of my stuff, because within me, there is that person, the goal setter, the person who's like, this will be mine by any means necessary. So I explored that through my male character, who was not afraid of his sexuality, who was not embarrassed by what he wanted or his body or his goals.
All that to say, I don't think it's easy to declare that all physical harm in a story is morally wrong or harmful to the reader or audience. If you really want to understand it more, you do need to analyze it in the context of the story, the setting, the characters, the writer, the metaphor, etc. After going through all these tests and trials, when the heroine finally beats the bad boy at his own game, she gets what she thought she wanted. This is usually when there's a significant separation between the two.
你去啊！见不到你我更开心，你不在我过得更好。
Or something that's simply keeping them apart. This is also the moment where the heroine is in a place where she is seen as strong and capable, but she doesn't feel complete. She knows rather subconsciously that her journey is not yet over. And now she's got all these new people in her life that are tied to the person who first challenged her, so she can't be completely rid of him. The cool part is that this challenger is also changing because just as she was affected by him, he is being affected by her. Not being able to be around her for a short while will exacerbate some of his immaturity, and it will become clear to him that he needs to grow up, not just for her, but for himself as well. Now our villain starts to become a hero in the story. His journey becomes more clear as he starts to face tests and trials of his own to figure out who he is and what his desires truly are. The first time the villain had challenged the heroine, it was for selfish reasons, and he didn't realize he was actually helping her grow into a more capable and confident woman. Now, this character who is becoming more complex is challenging the heroine because he knows it'll make her stronger. This is actually a sort of trope in and of itself that I love. It also works in a cycle and has potential for more organic conflict to occur. Hero challenges heroine, she succeeds, he likes that, so he challenges her again.
再来一局。
谁怕谁啊？
The heroine might get fed up with this and perceives this challenging her as bullying or picking on her, but she sees little glimpses of empathy, so she challenges him to prove that he is changing, that he is becoming more empathetic. But that annoys him because he doesn't want to admit vulnerability. And this just keeps happening again and again as they slowly learn to be more honest to themselves and to each other. But that is not enough conflict because this is an epic tale and we've got a lot of stuff to work through. Obstacles are now thrown at the couple to keep them apart. Parents don't want them to be together, the bad boy's past catches up to him, and people want to do her harm in order to hurt him. Other romantic interests crop up and misunderstandings occur. The heroine now reaches a new low until she finds herself tumbling into uncertainty. This is the moment at which the heroine will be forced to confront the Dark Mother. The Dark Mother, as described by Murdoch, is not an evil figure. Instead, she represents the power of feminine desire that is inside of the heroine. She's lashing out. She's angry that she cannot control the heroine. This could be presented as metaphor, but in this story, it's literally the hero's mom. And for a short time, she wins, causing a major separation between the couple. The heroine goes back to her parents, back to a simple life away from her new allies, and then in order to come back from this part of the journey, Murdoch states that one must be mindful of their own suffering. They must also understand that when they choose to come out of it, they will no longer be the same. So far, we've met two very important figures that represent two different sides of the heroine: the villainous crush and the dark mother. The villainous crush representing masculine desires such as power, confidence, and aggressiveness. The dark mother or dark feminine representing spite, chaos, rage, or seduction. These two figures transform the heroine, and she interacts with them and incorporates them into herself. In turn, these figures may become not only personified, but they may also transform. In this case, the villainous crush turns into a hero. As the heroine claws her way out of her suffering, she understands herself better, but due to some external threat or misunderstanding, she is unable to go to the hero. She may confide in a grandmother figure of sorts. It could be a friend who is wiser, or it could be an old woman. Murdoch calls this figure Grandmother Spider, which comes from a Native American myth. Grandmother Spider is a character who is concerned about people and helps them to discover the meaning of life. This is the moment where both the heroine and the hero must be true to themselves. Both of them have a meeting of sorts with Grandmother Spider. Now they're ready to be true to each other. It is in this step of the journey that truly marks the point of no return. Things will not simply become easy now that they're officially together. They may try to go back to the way things were, but they will keep finding themselves pulled together. Conflict will ensue over and over as they continue to fight their own demons, but at least this time, they ultimately have each other to lean on. They help each other. The next step is, of course, oneness. This is the marriage, the happily ever after, the marrying of two individuals into one partnership. It is a sacred event, often represented in some sort of ritual, and it's often where these stories end. When people say that's problematic about something like Reylo, I just laugh. What people love about this dynamic is that it is a little dark, and that's a good thing. Put yourself in the shoes of the heroine within this arc. Falling in love with the villain is about taking ownership over the stuff society said you cannot have or be. Power, sexual desire, aggressiveness. The villain challenges you to take it and be whatever you need to be to get what you want. They trick you into growing beyond your insecurities. And then it's even more of a power fantasy to then have affected the villain with your own natural gifts. As they see you beat them, they fall more madly in love with you. And then you're there for each other, being there for them as they work on themselves so that they can be a better partner for you, until you're both better, hand in hand, ready to take on the world together. It's beautiful. And it's the most epic love story I will ever know. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know in the comments what your favorite pieces of media are that use these tropes, whether it's webtoons or books. Something with visual media would be awesome because we rarely see it in visual media. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you have not done so already. And if you really, really liked it, then consider buying me a coffee or a tea, linked below. Thanks again, guys. Cheers.